Hello and welcome to Cloud Field Day 10. We're going to talk a little bit about how you can manage your cloud native workloads with Veeam. I'm David Hill. I'm a global technologist in Veeam's product strategy group, and I focus mainly on cloud native technologies, things like AWS, Microsoft Azure, Google Cloud Platform, and Kubernetes. So we're going to dive in and talk about essentially where we are today, where we're going, and then I'm going to hand over to Andrew, who's going to do a deep dive demo on how all these fit together, how it all works, and the strategy, and show you not only how you can protect your cloud workloads, but how you can manage all this centrally. So from a cloud native backup and recovery perspective, we kind of have four key components, and we have support for three of the major cloud providers. So no surprise, AWS, Microsoft Azure, and Google Cloud Platform. Now we're at certain points in time with versions in these platforms, and we're gonna talk about that. But also with Veeam Backup and Replication, that can also provide you with centralized data management. Now, a question that typically comes up is, okay, I have some workloads running out in AWS. I have some workloads running out in Microsoft Azure. I have to manage those and protect those independently. What I want is a single pane of glass that I can use to just go and protect all my workloads, regardless of whether they're out in AWS, off on vSphere, off on the physical world, or running out in Google or whatever platform you have. So as we go through this slide deck and we talk through this session, and then you'll see in AZ's demo, we not only have the capabilities for customers who were born in the cloud. So think about people who have just started their businesses and they're just building their workloads out in the public cloud. We also have the capabilities to manage all the workloads centrally for, say, like an enterprise who has for a long time had a virtualization platform like vSphere, and now moving out into this multi-cloud world. But also for these born in the cloud customers who have workloads across multiple services. And this brings it all together through this centralized data management platform. And I keep using the same kind of, I guess, terminology around this centralized data management. But this is critical to a successful multi-cloud disaster recovery data management protection solution, being able to just leverage the products either singularly or bringing them all together. So what do I mean by this? Well, when we look at what Veeam is providing out in the public clouds, being able to provide a backup solution that's cloud native. Now, what do I mean by cloud native? Well, from a Veeam perspective, cloud native means a solution that is able to use and utilize the actual cloud provider's capabilities. So if you think about over the past few years, a traditional backup solution that people were kind of looking at to manage their cloud workloads would use agents. So you'd have some backup server, maybe Veeam Backup and Replication running somewhere. You'd install some agents into a virtual machine or an instance, and then you protect it that way. When we talk about cloud native, much in the same way that Veeam's been doing backups in the vSphere and virtual world for so long, we leverage those inbuilt capabilities in the public cloud provider. So snapshots, object storage, that kind of capabilities. So we can just very easily integrate with those platforms and provide you with the data management solutions, the backup solutions that are required to protect those workloads, but also to understand those platforms in the event of doing a restore. If you think about like AWS as a great example, when you want to restore an instance or a database, for example, you need to be able to understand what VPC do I put it in, what subnet do I use. So being cloud native allows us to just integrate with that solution and provide you with the capability seamlessly from within our products. Cost effective is a big one. Our CTO, Danny Allen, always says the cloud isn't a charity. that's pretty obvious when you see some of the revenue numbers from these cloud providers around how things can get very expensive very quickly. So Veeam has a very unique built-in feature into all its cloud products that gives you a cost estimator that'll show you how much is this backup policy going to cost? What's it going to cost me from a snapshot perspective? What's it going to cost me from a data transfer perspective? So you can build out a cost-effective backup solution without having to sit there and scratch your head and think, well, this VM I'm only paying $100 a month for is going to cost me $1,000 to protect because I've gone and built out all these crazy replications. So it's very, very powerful from that perspective. Secure is another one, integrating with all the security of the public cloud providers. You know, things are only as secure as you want them to be. And, you know, there's kind of a long-standing running joke that people seem to think sometimes you put a workload in the cloud, it's secure, but then your firewall rules are set to any. Well, nobody can kind of counteract that, you know. So being able to integrate with things like identity and access management and Azure Active Directory and things like that to provide those secure capabilities, again, goes back to that cloud native aspect. And then cloud mobility. I've already spoken about in previous sessions about the aspects of multi-cloud and the world that we're living in today, and how people have workloads running out in Azure, running on vSphere, physical workloads. You know, I've got some Office 365 stuff. Leveraging a unique data format that spans across all these platforms is critical to being able to actually live in this multi-cloud world. So Veeam has a portable data format. So regardless of whether you protect an EC2 instance, a vSphere VM, or a Hyper-V VM, you can restore those virtual machines and instances back to any platform. And AZ is going to show a lot more about that in his demonstration. So moving on, I want to just kind of walk through what we actually do from a Veeam perspective with our 3 individual cloud platforms, and then finish on what it looks like from a centralized data management platform. So as I mentioned, things like snapshots and object storage and building out this centralized data management is critical to protecting your workloads across multiple platforms. So the first thing that we notice is if we look at this from an AWS perspective. Now we support multiple AWS accounts, we support multiple Google projects, and we support like multiple resource groups in Microsoft Azure. So again, that cloud native aspect allows us to build out secure solutions that meet the best practices for those individual public cloud providers, because they're all unique in the ways that they do things. And you see here from an AWS perspective, we leverage multiple AWS accounts. They can be used as a security boundary. So you can see here, for example, on the left, we have a production account. We've got some EC2 instances, some RDS databases, and we've obviously got our VPCs configured. We can protect all these leveraging EBS snapshots. We can then take those snapshots and offload them out to S3. And we can also back up things like all the VPC configurations. So the subnets, the security groups, everything that you need in a VPC, that if you were to delete that accidentally or have some configuration changes, you would need to restore in the event of recovering workloads. We're able to protect all of those by integrating seamlessly with AWS and meet its best practices around security as well. When we look at things like availability zones, and this is the same across all the cloud platforms, we can do things like snapshot replication. So you see here in our production account, we can take our EC2 workloads, we can take our snapshots, we can actually replicate those snapshots to another region. We can replicate across AWS accounts as well. And the same with RDS as well. So protecting not only EC2 instances, but the RDS databases as well. And when you think about that best practice around the 3-2-1 rule, so where you have 3 copies of your data across 2 media types with at least 1 off-site, this is one of the ways that you can start to meet that 3-2-1 rule by doing things like snapshot replicas. So you can have a workload running in Oregon, you can go and replicate it over to London, and then you can even have that offloaded to object storage in another region as well. So there's a number of ways that we can set this up. Again, it's all supported through multiple AWS accounts or Google projects or whatever. And then when we want to do restores, we see it's very similar. So we want to either recover entire instances or volumes. We can do this from Snapshot. We can do it to the original location, so we can overwrite existing instances. We can go and create new instances in new locations, in new accounts, whatever we need. We can do file level recovery as well, not only from Snapshot, but also backups in our object storage platform. We can recover our databases, again, to the original location or to new locations. And then we even have the ability to restore entire VPCs or individual attributes in those VPCs to the original or new location. And we can do that whether we're redeploying databases, EC2 instances, or just picking VPC attributes to go and restore somewhere else. So if you've accidentally got a big security group and you've gone and deleted it and you sat there and gone, oh, I can't remember the rules, you can just very easily go in and say, I just want to recover this security group.
David, can I ask a couple of questions at this point?
Yeah, sure.
Just wanted to first confirm that is Veeam Backup for AWS still an appliance?
It is, yes.
Right. Because I mean, it's one of my bugbears when I say that, cloud native, yes, you're using cloud native mechanisms to do things and you're integrating into that, not using agents. But to me, cloud native would also be that, your appliance uses those mechanisms and technologies as well, instead of being an appliance. So, okay, that's more a debate. But the other question I just wanted to ask was that, is this snapshot has to be taken by Veeam itself? Or can it also then, if you retrospectively put Veeam in, can it also then ingest the previously taken snapshots and starts backing them up?
Yeah, good question. No, so the snapshots have to be managed from a Veeam perspective. So once you deploy Veeam Backup for AWS, then you start building up your snapshots. It won't retrospectively go back and say, okay, I've got all these snapshots when they were taken for these particular workloads. No, it won't do that.
So is there any reason why it can't be done? I mean, just given that if it's using the same mechanisms as, say, AWS native mechanisms, because thinking from a customer's point of view, if they put another backup system in, they would like to have the same system handling the older data as well.
Yeah. So the thing is that when you're talking about cloud native AWS snapshots, for example, there is no easy way. Well, there is no way to actually to take ownership of those snapshots. It's just that is by design. And so why would we need to do that? I mean, we come in there and we have our own management stack, and then we create snapshots and then we manage them. So it's like how the security is done.
I was just hoping that, there was some mechanism to, put new, say, for example, policies on that gives you a software access, and then you can do that. But obviously, hopefully, if that can be introduced, that'll probably be a good option.
Moving on, from a Microsoft Azure perspective, what you see is everything from an architecture perspective is exactly the same. So when I talk about that modular components and how these all just fit together and integrate, everything that we do is designed to work in the same manner, regardless across all the different platforms. So from a Veeam Backup for Microsoft Azure perspective, again, we protect things like Azure VMs, Azure disks. We take Azure VM snapshots and we offload those into Azure Blob Storage. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about all the different features and capabilities across all the platforms. We've obviously at previous Cloud Field Days spent a lot of time talking about that. What I want to do today is just kind of highlight the capabilities and then let AZ do essentially most of the talking with his phenomenal demos.
Can I ask a question real quick? For Azure, is there any Kubernetes integration?
Yeah, so with, we're not going to showcase it today. We're actually going to have a Kubernetes session at the next Cloud Field Day. But with Veeam's acquisition of Kasten, so with Kasten by Veeam, Kasten provides all the Kubernetes integration to protect all your Kubernetes workloads, whether you're using AKS, EKS, OpenShift, Rancher, whatever. So again, if you think back to that modular diagram that I showed you with all the different components, Kasten and the Kubernetes protection sits at that layer, and it's one of the product components that Veeam has available. So we can protect Kubernetes workloads, we can protect Azure workloads, and separately.
David, real quick question. As far as feature parity is concerned across all the different cloud platforms, are there any plans for Veeam for Azure to be able to do similarly what you're doing with AWS to protect VNets and database platforms, et cetera?
Yeah, yes, and I have that on some slides in a few minutes, so I will be able to answer your question shortly. So, but yes. So moving on to Google, you'll notice that pretty much the slide doesn't change. The terminology changes. We go from basically calling it Azure VMs and Azure disks to compute engine instances and disks. Everything is identical from that perspective. So we can protect all our Google Compute instances, our disk, we leverage the Google snapshots, and then we offload those out to the cloud storage, object storage buckets. Again, from a recovery perspective, in exactly the same way that I was talking about how we do it in AWS, in Azure and Google, it's exactly the same way. You can do instance recoveries in or out of place from snapshots, from your backups in object storage, and you can do file level recovery from snapshots or from those backups in object storage. Now, from a centralized data management perspective, what you see here is essentially Veeam Backup and Replication becoming the centralized data management platform. And you'll see in Andrew's demonstration how you can manage your backup policies across all these platforms. And essentially what you can do is you can deploy Veeam Backup for AWS and Veeam Backup for Microsoft Azure directly from Veeam Backup and Replication, and then manage everything natively within Veeam Backup and Replication. You can do things like backup copy jobs to on-premises from out in your cloud backup repositories. You can do things like instant VM recovery. So you can take like an EC2 instance that's running, go and do an instant VM recovery to vSphere. You can do recovery to on-premises VMs. And then you can even take like a workload from Google and go and restore that to AWS if you want. So through Veeam Backup and Replication, that becomes the centralized data management. And then you just essentially point it to all your public clouds and build it out from there. So when we look at that, it doesn't matter what public cloud it's in, what availability zone it's in, whether you're leveraging snapshots or object storage, you can manage everything through Veeam Backup and Replication. And again, to just kind of recap, the protection, you can leverage native snapshots, so like EBS snapshots, Google snapshots. You can offload all your backups out to object storage. You can leverage things like hot and cold storage in Microsoft Azure Object Storage, for example, their blob storage. And then you can even do like migration. So when I'm talking about that cloud migration, that cloud mobility, being able to move back and forth is critical.
So David,
yeah,
if a customer has basically abandoned the data center, they have nowhere to stick, the traditional Veeam and backup and replication, appliance or service. Do they then have no way to manage everything centrally? Do they have to stand that up elsewhere, stick it in an EC2 instance or something? Or
yeah, so
are you guys looking at maybe making a service for that?
Yeah, you'd have to deploy Veeam Backup and Replication in an instance out in the public cloud somewhere to manage all that centrally.
Yeah, to Arthur's point, I think it'd be really cool, if it was truly cloud native, if it was basically SaaS at that point, so customers didn't have to something else to deploy. They could just sign up and use it.
Yeah. Where we're going, what I kind of want to talk about is where we're at today. And the question's being asked about capabilities around like Azure, for example. What you see here on the right-hand side is the versions that we have available today, GA. So Veeam Backup for Google Cloud Platform is version 1. Veeam Backup for Microsoft Azure is version 2, and Veeam Backup for AWS is version 3. And you can see like the 3 key capabilities of those products. Why is it done like that? Well, on the left, what we talk about is the different capabilities that we bring in on these versions. So version 1 is we deploy that product to the public cloud providers marketplace. So for example, Veeam Backup for GCP, that gives the born in the cloud customers the capabilities to go and protect their workloads. As we go forward, the next version, version 2, brings in integration into our centralized data management. So obviously from an Azure perspective, which we GA'd again back in the end of January, we brought in that centralized data management with Azure version 2 and Veeam Backup and Replication version 11. And then we expand that. So version 3 and version 4 onwards brings in more capabilities. So like AWS, for example, you see that we added support for RDS backups, VPC backups, granular role-based access control. So you can see the trajectory we're on. And Veeam Backup for AWS is always the first one, and then the other products follow suit. So as one gets deployed and released, sorry, not deployed, released, then the next one will then get worked on, and then that will be released as well. So as we bring these out, we add more and more capabilities across these versions. But version 1 is we get that out in the marketplace. We provide the capabilities for the born in the cloud customers. Version 2, we bring in the centralized data management. And then version 3, we add in more of the cloud native capabilities. So like RDS backups and that kind of thing.
Kind of mentioning cloud native, does this also support things like EFS? Like if I'm running just containers only and my file storage may be in an EFS, is that something that's automated through your product?
Yeah, good question. So as a version 3, we don't support EFS, but as I showed on that slide, as version 4 comes out and other versions come out, we will be adding more capabilities around the native services in the cloud.
And do you have any dates or times or quarters for the version phase releases?
No, we don't really give out dates and times. And there's a genuine reason for that. Veeam releases things when they're ready, not on a specific date. Veeam doesn't care if it's the last to market with something or anything. Veeam only is interested in releasing something that's reliable. So it will be released when it's released. And that is the main reason why we don't give out dates. So we'd rather it work than hit a particular time to get something out.